and welcome to Do the Right Thing, a weekly writing prompt podcast. I'm Matias.
And I'm Jarvis.
Jarvis and I are members of an ancient civilization that has just discovered that carving symbols on walls is a good way to carry information towards the future. However, Jarvis and I are very lazy, and we don't know how to chisel these symbols. So we just don't do it very often.
Exactly. So we're doing a challenge. Each week we sit down for 30 minutes. Our goal is to write a complete short story using 3 of 4 randomly generated words.
Then we come on the podcast, we read the story, we talk about what we learned in writing it, and then we talk about stories sent in by you listeners.
Exactamundo. We're simply here to help you do the right thing. A Doof Media Production.
Media Production. That's right.
Look at us. Episode 64.
Look at us.
We've been doing this for 12 more weeks than a year. We're doing great.
That's true. That's true. And every single time we still comment on this. It's at this point it's getting a little bit meta because last time I commented on how we always talk about how we're doing, and now I'm commenting on how we always talk about how we're doing. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm still in disbelief that I am here on my floor next to my dirty closet recording a podcast. You know, I as a little young youth, I never thought I would be doing this. In fact, I thought as a youth that I would probably be on a ship heading towards the moon.
Yeah, me too. I thought I was going to be a scientist studying lizards. I thought that was going to be my specialty. So, I mean, there's plenty of time in the future to do that. So
yeah, because I know people were telling me that, oh yeah, you can be a scientist and do anything, but no one told me how much work, how boring textbooks can possibly be to actually become a scientist. So I just decided to write and read books by old dead people instead, which is by far a lot more fun than reading any sort of textbook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you hold this, piece of pressed tree material in your hands. You look at the scribblings, and then you hallucinate a whole adventure. And it's a pleasant experience. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So this week, our theme is theme. So Matias, tell me a little bit about what theme means to you.
I like themes. I think themes are very useful. So the words this week:
suppress, bad, east, and goalkeeper.
Yeah. So that's where I was trying to pull out a theme from. I used the first 3. I used suppress, bad, east. I did not use goalkeeper.
And you didn't use goalkeeper because did it just not find its way into your story?
I just didn't want to do a sports story. Basically, I sat down and I started writing. I just, as usual, jump off the points that are there. I started with east, right? They're traveling east on the road, and I started with woman, and then eventually, got into what some of the difficulties were. Mm-hmm. However, and once we see what the story's about, this will be you should talk about it, of course, but I didn't actually have a story or really like much direction in where I was going until I really thought about like, hey, what kind of thing do I want to talk about? Like at first I was trying to find it organically, which is certainly a good way to do it, but you need other things pulling you forward. But for this one, I didn't have those other things pull me forward yet. I wrote it while I was pretty tired and stuff. But eventually, I was thinking, what are some, emotions and questions that I find myself thinking about a lot? And eventually, I remembered one. Then it was much easier to translate that emotion, that feeling, that question into the initial thoughts I had of this setting and translate it into this metaphor. So.
Yeah, cool, really cool. So the process of actually writing this week, did you find it very easy? Like, did you just charter out a nice 30 minutes of your time, or was it more sporadic throughout the week?
At first it was pretty difficult, mostly again because I was just really tired. I've been off my meds for like 3 days just because like I forgot to refill them, because you gotta set an appointment and like talk to them and tell them how you feel. So I just put it off for too long, and then I ran out, and then the day I ran out, that's when I got my appointment, but it takes a bit to actually get the prescription again. So I've been feeling very, very tired, but once I had the theme, once I had the feeling, once I had the thing that I wanted to carry out, the entire story came pretty naturally and pretty quickly, and it just took the amount of time for me to actually write it out. But I once I had the idea, there was no stopping. There was no writer's block. There was nothing like that.
All right, cool.
In fact, I had to stop a little. I wanted to continue on a little bit further, but I decided just to find a stopping point.
Wow, nice. So the balls definitely started rolling, and I know it's like that bittersweet feeling when it comes to doing the right thing, when you do want to keep on going with it, but if you push it out any longer, then you're gonna have to read the longest story on the podcast. So that's great. Is there anything that we really need to know before hopping right on into it?
No, I don't have anything else to add, I don't think.
All right, cool. So let's go ahead and hop right on into the story.
All right. The story is called No Drink. A girl pulled a cart along a long, dry road. A knotty, thick rope was wound around her waist and then up, across her chest and back over her shoulders, before attaching to the cart. The cart's wheels wobbled along the stones, and she had to plan her path carefully, always keeping in mind their trajectory and feeling. It was hard to steer, with only a rope, and she didn't want to get stuck somewhere. The cart was heavy, but she had been pulling for a long, long time. Her posture was lean forward, like the figure on the prow of a ship, such that if the rope broke, she would surely fall on her face. At this point, the pulling and the rope felt so natural along her shoulders that she wondered that if she didn't have the cart, would she even be able to walk normally? "I want water," the boy inside the cart said. The land was very dry. The road snaked lazily between hills of stone and sand, held together by meek scrub and history. They had had very little water, and hardly any opportunity to give them the water she had found. In these lands, there is not much material to make things out of, and the water carriers that do exist are made from animal skins. She had one, a single, flat water skin, made from the remains of a buffalo, lashed to the underside of the cart. She knew exactly how much water it could hold. About the weight of 2 fist-sized rocks. She always wanted to give it to the boy, but she knew he would not drink. He had taken a vow to never touch the remains of the dead. She had to respect it. Or had to be seen to, anyway. When she had to, which was often in these dry lands, she might trick him into drinking it. A well would be dry, but she would not tell him, instead filling the bucket with her own reserve, insisting that they had to move on or that the well had suddenly dried if he asked for more. He was always frustrated by that, and she felt all the more guilty for violating his conscience for his own safety. The skin was empty now, anyway. "Soon we will reach a hamlet. They have a well, and we will have some water," she said. "How much longer?" he replied. "Soon." Her steps were consistent, a slow beat against the ground. She was glad for one thing. Attached to her back, bound by the same rope that tied her to the cart, was her parasol. It bobbed above her and kept the worst of the sun's glare off of her head. It was made of river reeds from her home. Home was far from here, now, but the parasol seemed almost to hold a hint of that ever-cool place. The sun was caught on the rough edges, so that from afar she looked like a dull brown beetle, steadily marching through the trail. As they crested a soft hill, she could make out a single line of smoke at the very edge of the horizon. Finally. That was the hamlet, no doubt. She just had to make it there, and she could rest, and they could both have water. "I can see it. On the horizon," she said, her spirits lifting. "Not long now." Inside the cart, he groaned. "That is so far, and it is so hot. We need water. I don't think we're going to make it." She didn't respond. She was so tired, and the cart was so heavy. But she had to keep pulling, or they would never get there. She suppressed the biting little thoughts, the ones snipping at her conscience, that they would certainly get there if he would just walk, or if... No, she wouldn't think of abandoning him or the cart. She couldn't. It took hours more, in the sun, to reach the hamlet. Her clothing, light but all-covering, was covered in sticky sweat. In the last hour, every single step was echoed with a prayer of thanks to her parasol. The heat from the stones beneath her, which radiated through the soles of her sandals, reminded her of just how lucky she was to have the respite of those old reeds. The little houses appeared, and she made her way to their center, where the well was. They were small, made of the same stone and dirt of the surroundings. Truly, they looked merely like square hills, and were not much to boast of. Still, they must have been cool inside. As she entered town, a single goat, resting under the shadow of one hut, bleated. An old man looked out, and then went to join her at the well. "We're here," she said. The old man approached, and she said, "Hello." "Hello," he said. "You are wanting of water?" "Yes," she said, and she could feel heat throbbing in her forehead. "And to rest a night?" The old man was already shaking his head. "Rest we can offer, but water..." He turned to the well. "Our well is running dry. No rains for almost a year here. We cannot give you water, as there is little for ourselves." Despair reared in her throat, and a quiet panic paced in her arms and chest. Her knees were weak, and she felt she could not move, or she would fall and never move again. Her eyes strained, telling her she should cry, but of course, there were no tears. Behind her, she heard feet hit the dirt. The boy walked up beside her, laid a hand on her arm. "What is wrong?" the boy said. He looked like her, dark-skinned, tired. He was weaker, though, grown weaker by staying in the cart so long. Still, if they lived in a city, like the one they had once lived in years ago, he would not look out of place. He wasn't adapted to the desert, but neither was he atrophied. The old man did not say anything, and she cursed him for his cowardice, for forcing her to be the one to tell her boy what new bad thing had befallen them. She swallowed, and her throat closed for a moment, sticky. "They do not have water for us," she said, finally. "They have hardly water for themselves." "No," he said, and instantly his voice wavered in that same despair that was in her throat. It clutched her heart, pulling it in tight, cutting strings toward somewhere deeper and darker in her. "No, please, we need water. We will die without water." The old man shook his head. "We cannot. We will die if we give you water." The boy spat, and the girl's instincts went wild for a moment. She wanted to strike him for wasting water and for antagonizing the old man when the situation could still be salvaged. "Curse you," the boy said. "Curse your land, and your well, and your goat." The girl's anger flared as bright as the sun and as indiscriminate. Internally, she cursed too, but for different reasons. At the man for not giving the same sort of sacrifice she did, and the well for not having water, and the sky for refusing to rain, and the sun for shining so bright, and the man's goat as well for taking the water that might have gone to them. She cursed the boy harshly for being unable or unwilling to walk. She could never tell which. And she cursed herself for letting them get this bad. If she hadn't had to pull the cart, how much further would they be? Would they be at the river now? But she didn't do any of those things, didn't say any of them. The sun was in her eyes, and she blinked. Finally, she croaked, "Get back in the cart, and let me speak to him." The boy complied and did so. "Please," she told the old man. "We need the water." She thought rapidly. "Could we trade? Anything? Labor? Our clothes?" The old man shook his head. Those things are less precious than water. Still, maybe. Yes? She asked. It would be a gamble, for us, that rain falls before we need it, but we could trade for the cart or your parasol. They would be a boon for us if we last through harvest. I cannot offer much. 1 bucket of water for the cart, half one for the parasol? One or the other, not both. The girl reeled internally. A bucket was enough water for both of them. Half was enough for one. Enough to last to the next well, perhaps. But she considered what he asked for. She hated to give up the parasol. Things were so hard already, without the sun screaming into her eyes and her skin. Without it, she would be nearly blind for half the day when the sun was in the east. Her skin would prickle with heat, and a few cool drops of sweat would boil away. The thought made her despair. There was the other offer, the cart. But there was no way she could give it up. How would the boy continue? He had never walked for more than an hour at most, and that had been a special circumstance. The time after, when she had begged and pleaded for him to walk, he had, but it had only been a short while before he had stopped and said he could not go on. She pulled on his arm, begged him, told him that they would die if he did not go on, and he only said, I can't. I can't. I can't. She had collapsed and sobbed, and he did too. He didn't want to be this way. In fact, he hated himself for it, too. He told her to go on without him, to leave him there, to die, because he deserved it, because he was useless. And for a moment she considered. She hated herself for that. In the end, she had shouldered the cart again, and he had crawled inside, and they had gone on, and they didn't die then. She could not give up the cart, not without facing that decision again. And she could not face that decision again. The parasol, she found herself saying. I will trade you the parasol. Didn't sound like her. She took it off her shoulders, and after running her hand over the reeds one final time, smelling that coolness from home, she handed it over. The old man nodded, then went to the well and retrieved half the bucket of water. When he handed it to her, he clasped a hand to her arm, met her eyes. His were dark and dry, too. You should drink the water yourself, he said. She only shook her head. She went inside the cart, told the boy that she had talked things out, that the old man had had a change of heart. She watched as the boy drank the water greedily. When it was half empty, he pressed it into her hands and told her to drink. She refused. He insisted. But she saw how dry his lips still were, how they cracked and flaked. And so when she lifted the bucket to her lips, she only pressed it there. Felt the cool liquid wash against her lips. She swallowed her own saliva, even as her body screamed at her to open her lips, to drink it all. But she couldn't. If she did, he would die. She was sure of it. She set the bucket down and told him her stomach was full. She set the bucket down and told him her stomach was full, and for him to drink the rest. Are you sure? Yes. They slept the night in one of the huts. In the morning, she shouldered her burden and headed back along the path. The old man waved at them as they went, the parasol over one shoulder. The boy didn't see. He was in the cart. 2 months later, the rains finally fell. Shoots of grass turned the fields as green as apples, and life returned to the land. The old man went out with what meager money he had down the path to get to the next town, hoping to trade the parasol for some more seeds. If he made quick, he might have time to plant them before the lands dried, maybe even enough time for them to sprout. 2 days' journey down the path, he found the cart. One skeleton was tangled in rope, face down in front, the other curled up inside.
All right, well, fantastic story, Matias. Honestly, I think this is definitely one of your best ones that you've written. I really love this tone that you're really using throughout. How dire and desperate this situation really seems, and I also really love what you're saying about self-sacrifice. I think that's and it comes across beautifully on the page. So. Really, what kind of brought you about to want to write this story this week? And how did the words really influence that for you?
Right. So I just had the original setting first of just a desert traveling along the road, and I had a character walking along the road, and then I decided, well, I'll make it a woman because I don't want to always make it, let's not just always assume a male protagonist. And then after I was thinking about themes, that's when, I got to that question of, I mean, I have this thing and I don't want to I have very complicated feelings about it because internally I view it as like a virtue, even though it's not good at all, but like self-sacrifice to the point of, your self deteriorating.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I constantly have this feeling of like, I'm not doing enough, even if I'm doing a lot already. And so this is a way of like me exploring not exploring, but just another way for me to articulate to myself, like, hey, maybe it's not always a good feeling to have, and maybe you need to ignore it, and sometimes you do have to be selfish.
Yeah.
So I thought that theme, it's something I think about a lot. I think there's a lot of stuff that a lot of questions that a lot of people do actually think about a lot of themes that people do find themselves thinking about, and it's just a matter of like identifying that this is a thought process that you return to a lot of the times, in different flavors, or this is something you struggle with, etc. And this is one of them for me.
Definitely. I mean, the ending portrays what you're trying to say so well. How the person pulling this cart is constantly sacrificing water to this other person who isn't really doing much. I'm under the impression that they're just not as able, right? But as we get to the very end, we kind of see that her sacrificing water so often to this other person not only killed her, but killed the other person also. And I don't know, it perfectly kind of rounds out this story and the message that yes, self-sacrifice can be noble, and typically it is seen as very noble, but in this case, and in a lot of other cases that could be similar, it is detrimental to all parties, especially for the person that is carrying this boat. To be sacrificing these things just makes it a issue for everyone else, which I thought that was a really great ending. It was, I don't know, I guess the word that I'm thinking of is it was very mature.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you liked it so much and that it came across so clearly.
So in this story, the old man that they meet, since it seems like everything within it is representational of something else, in this story, what does the old man represent?
I mean, that's a good question because I didn't really think about that wasn't one part that I was like thinking about a lot, so I actually have to think about this. It's multiple things, of course. It's like any kind of outside opportunity / cost kind of thing. But I mean, it's also just, the message that, he says is just, actually, take care of yourself. It's, other people in the life of someone that struggles with this kind of thing, where from an outside perspective, you can tell, you can see, what the damage is and what, the person should really be doing to preserve themselves. But internally, like, it can be really, really, really hard to accept that notion.
And also it's a thing to where this old man is on the outside of this relationship that they have, looking in.
Some of this is hard to talk about because, this is somewhat drawn from some real life experiences. And like, obviously I haven't been, going through the desert until I die of thirst. So it's not that literal, but yeah, there's parts of this where I want to talk about, but I don't know how to talk about it without being like, oh, this person in my life was this way, and so I represented it like this, Yeah, I don't want to do that.
Again, it's the like very relatable idea of sacrifice, and how you are
Mm-hmm.
sacrificing for this other person that you were in some sort of relationship with, whether that's brother and sister or dating or like whatever.
The other complication that is here, because it's not just about the self-sacrifice, it's also like I wish I had explored it a little bit more, but I was just trying to like carry out at least one thing successfully
Mm-hmm.
and not just juggle too many things. So there's only like a hint of this, I guess. But this other notion of someone who physically feels incapable of helping themselves,
Mm-hmm.
like it's not like the boy in the cart is not, they're not incapable of walking. I
Yeah.
don't know how clear that they came across, but they are unwilling to walk, or they think that they can't, whatever extenuating factor. But it's always like you don't know how much of that is actually on the person. Like the reality is that you cannot make them walk, and if they do not walk, then you will both die.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, the only way for both of you to live is if they, get in the cart and you pull. Unless if you're willing to leave them and the cart, you are left with a binary choice, because they are, since they cannot or will not walk, you are left with a binary choice of pulling the cart or leaving them. And if you're not able to leave them, then
You have to pull the cart.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's more that I wanted to do there, more talking about like the girl's like motivations and thought processes, and that internal struggle she has constantly.
Mm-hmm.
But there just wasn't a ton of room for it, especially because it's also just something hard to like handle with nuance.
Yeah. Also, like through
Yeah.
through the frame that you're kind of telling it, I get this idea that, I mean, it seems very storytelling,
Yeah.
to where it's this streamlined story that can be representative of so many things. The desert being dry, wanting water, where someone could take this very literal, or they could kind of see these multiple layers that you're kind of layering on there.
Yeah. So it has multi levels. I'm sure someone could actually, read into this a bunch and be like, well, the desert, because it's this dry feeling, it reminds me of, whatever that resonates inside of a person. For me, like, although it's interesting, the motivations for the story went, desert first, and then I found the theme as a separate thing. So I don't know how. I mean, they might be tied together. I don't know. The feeling of dryness, and this has been represented in a couple of my stories before, reminds me a lot of just feelings of depression,
Mhm.
of just like, like summer heat, laziness, where you just like can't get out of bed.
Yeah.
That's like the feeling of depression for me.
Yeah.
It's somewhat related to that, of just that discomfort that you can't really
Get away from.
get rid of, even when you do have water. It's not enough. Like you need to be like in a cold pool to get rid of that kind of heat. Yeah, so that's what it was connected to me. But of course, someone else could connect it to something else, or of just something with a constant difficulty. I mean, you could just connect it to financial trouble,
Mhm.
or whatever else. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of options here.
Yeah, there are so many different avenues that you can possibly go down when trying to analyze this story, and that's just a testament to how good this story really is. So going back, since this week we are talking about theme, and you've already talked about exactly what went into trying to think about and conceptualize this theme, but when it actually came to writing it, did you find any difficulty when it came to kind of bringing that theme out into the light, or was it very natural as soon as you had the main idea for it?
Well, surprisingly, actually, it wasn't that difficult. And I thought it would be more, and I've definitely had more difficulty before. I think doing this project and practicing writing, actually, like if I wrote the story, 2 years ago, I think it would have been a lot more difficult. And not to mention, just overall worse. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, over the course of doing the right thing over a year, I feel like I've broken down that writer's block
Okay,
barrier a
nice.
lot. I mean, of course, it still happens sometimes, but it's not nearly as bad anymore. So the reason I'm saying that is just for listeners that are struggling with that, like that's totally normal. You're not weird for struggling with writer's block, but eventually it gets easier. So I
Mhm.
wanted to reassure.
Yeah, and then also
But
with that practice, I mean, I definitely see whatever section of the mind kind of brings about all these ideas, as at least for me, working like a muscle, right? To where the
mhm.
more that you delve into there and try to access a lot of those ideas, the easier it will become over time to when, I mean, at least for me, the big hope is that those ideas go hand in hand with my everyday life, to where it's so easy to kind of access that other side of the brain to where it's natural and seamless. So, I mean, that's why I do the right thing, to kind of get to that point.
Yeah, like I said, I think about this theme a lot and other themes a lot. And I think, when you recognize the stuff that you've been thinking about and when you've like articulated it in different ways, I think translating it into something like this actually gets fairly, because you, like I already had like basically a bunch of points that I think about, right? I don't think about the summary of it, right? I don't think about self-sacrifice is bad if you do it too much, right? I don't think about that. I think about the feelings of the internal struggle that I have thinking about it. And that is multiple points of an argument rather than just the one. Yeah. And so going through each of those points, each of those feelings and just, finding that way to translate them it feels pretty natural. Of course, part of it, and I don't know my answer to this own question is, I don't know how much of that was just because I just like happened to have like a setting / conflict problem that actually translated pretty well. Like I can imagine a scenario, I guess, where like I start writing one story and the theme that I want to explore with it is like pretty much incompatible. So I'm not entirely sure, but at the same time, there's also like a lot of different permutations this could go on. It could be medicine, it could be, I don't know, magic energy rather than water. There's a lot of actually different options. Basically, I've already said this. We've already articulated it a couple times. But if you find the theme, I think, if you find the things that you think about, if you find the things that you're struggling with, translate them to a page, I think gets pretty easy. And I think it makes for a better story. I think this is one of my favorite stories that I've written in a very long time. So probably my top 5 favorite stories that I've written. So
oh yeah, definitely.
Because it's one of those things that I care a lot about. So
yeah. So even though this story is shining, even though it is like a great foot forward, all that glitters is sadly not gold. And we can always work on even our best of works. So,
yeah, Chris.
If you had a second opportunity, let's say unlimited time, a whole weekend, a nice bottle of wine by a cozy fire in the winter, how would you go about trying to reconstruct this story, and what would you add to it?
So, like I said, there's more explorations of the theme that I would include in there. I would include more of that internal conflict, maybe especially probably add more of why this girl cares so much about the boy. You don't actually know what their relationship is. You just know that she feels that she can't let him go, and well, what are the reasons for that, and what are the there's several other thoughts and feelings that I have about this kind of situation that I didn't have space for. And so yeah, I would be making space for those as well. So this story could be probably another 2,000 words long without the plot changing at all.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that is a really great idea, because I know as I was reading it, that was something that I was kind of thirsting for also, is because they have this connection, I would like to get some sort of indication of what kind and exactly how deep, and like why she is so willing to sacrifice so many things for this other person, beyond it of course being the right thing to do, right?
Yeah, there's multiple things there of like, one, what is their connection? Why does she feel that particular like tie, right? But additionally, it's there's 2 answers. Like if you just say because he's family, right? Just that is not enough. Why should you sacrifice everything for family or whatever is also a question to ask. For me, it's always been with something like that like I could not consider myself a good person if I didn't. And where does that come from, and how valid is that idea, and what is the correct answer in this sort of situation? Because it's also, especially to the girl, it's not so straightforward as just do the utilitarian thing and make sure that at least one person gets out of there, especially because especially like she didn't know that she was going to
die,
that that they wouldn't, like, there was a risk, but she didn't know, you know. Yeah.
So, as we ask every week, what did you learn in writing this? What did you learn about theme, or just about your own writing process in general?
This is another reminder, and I hate to, be repeating things, especially, over the course of multiple episodes and stuff, but just that I have these feelings, and I have these, themes and ideas, and I should be writing them down more, because it felt right going through it, especially as I was picking up momentum and, like, thinking of the stuff that I wanted to carry out. And we only talked a little bit about the tone, this, more storytelling, vague thing, but it was, it feels a lot easier and more natural sometimes than to pick a very esoteric setting and outline every single piece of detail in the scene and all the character names and all the powers and whatnot. I mean, those are super, super fun. Obviously, I do a podcast, Endless Worm. I do really, really like those things. But when writing, specific themes, especially short stories, sometimes it's perfectly all right to, just go vague and sacrifice details in favor of more space for these kind of complications and thought processes.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, thank you so much for bringing this story to us this week. I really loved reading it.
I'm glad you did.
So now, it's on to our listener-submitted stories section. As we say every week, we're going to spoil all of these stories profusely. So please, if you haven't read the stories that we are about to talk about right here, right now, then stop right now, go, listen to them, and come on back so we can talk about them. And the stories that we are going to be talking about this week are by Ghost Pac-Man 4, Kamikaze Tomato, Wild Bow, Ace of Sword, and Starless Night.
That's right. And I'm very excited to talk about all of these. These were really, really, really great stories. And of course, so many others on the thread were really, really good. So actually, I mean, I would recommend everyone to read all of the stories because they were really good this week.
Exactly. And the first one up is by Ace of Sword with Omens.
Yeah, so Ace of Sword in the comments talks about how it's been a little bit since they last submitted. And so this one's a little bit shorter, but I still very much appreciate it, and I think it outlines a cool story. So this scene is essentially a secretary going to the Duke, which we assume is the leader of this sort of area or nation, explaining to the Duke all the reports of what's going on in and outside the kingdom. So taxes are being paid. However, the orcs are starting to raid the border, which they haven't done in a while. And the Duke repeatedly, with all these threats, is kind of dismissive of them and thinking they're dumb for ever rising up again after they've already lost before. So the orcs are rising up, and then in the inhabitants of the Broken Empire are starting to rise up with these dark shaman and cultists and whatnot. And again, the Duke sort of dismisses them. And then they talk about how at the summer ceremony there was a bad omen, but again the Duke is kind of dismissing it. It was just a single cloud in the sky. And with all of these, we're kind of like we are following the logic of the Duke, and we're like, okay, yeah, that doesn't sound actually too bad. And yeah, I mean, a single cloud is kind of ridiculous to be a bad omen, and if it's just some random people, it's not that bad. But through all of them and this sort of repeated thing, we kind of, I think, start to suspect that maybe things are actually not so good as the Duke thinks, and that maybe things are going to go kind of bad in the future. I thought that was a nice little ominous note to end on, talking about these dark prophecies that are happening in these cursed lands.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, I think this story does a great job in building up this world. And I don't know if I've said anything about it on the podcast, but recently I have been rewatching Bright for the 4th time. And a lot of things within this kind of remind me of...
So just real quick, you're talking about Bright, the Netflix original movie
with Will Smith, yes.
With Will Smith, yes. And you've watched it 4 or 5 times. How many times?
I think because I watched it again yesterday, so I've seen it five different times, and to this day I still think it is the biggest misstep I've ever seen when it comes to a fantasy idea, because it had a lot of promise. But I say all that to say that some of the motifs of just the class ranking is very similar to that movie. But on this story specifically, I really do like how we start off in this place of power, talking to this duke about all these different things happen. Everything that is talked about seems to be meeting the status quo, but throughout the entire story, there's this kind of looming danger, these omens. And I think that tension is set up very nicely throughout the story, up until where we get to the very end, where now I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what these omens really bring to this world. So yeah, really great story.
I think they're very flattered that you compared their story to Bright. I think that's a big compliment.
Yeah, I mean,
towards Ace of Swords.
They're one step away from finally being Will Smith, and I know that that's been Ace of Swords' personal goal. So you're almost there, buddy. Almost
it
there.
has been mine. So
yeah, I mean, I would quit this podcast so quick just to spend one day as Will. All right, but next story up is by Kamikaze Tomato, with a new goalkeeper.
That's right. So we follow Mary, who has just gone to this alley, and I think we can kind of feel Kamikaze Tomato, going through this description and kind of building this scene in their own mind as they write. And I really enjoyed it. So this alleyway has this cacophony of noisemakers, right? There's all these pans that are taking in water just to make noise. There's clinking and clanking, swinging things, a thick door swinging in the wind to repeatedly whack against a length of fence. And it kind of comes out to be, it drowns out the noises of the street, and so it kind of becomes as private as an office. I just really like that notion. But anyway, we get into the actual scene proper, where Mary is talking to these two people from the shadows, Heath and this wispy old shadow that turns out to be this old man. And so they sort of test her. Heath has brought Mary to be the new goalkeeper. We learn a little bit about Mary. By goalkeeper, we sort of understand there's some magical thievery kind of thing going on. Mary does this interesting thing with, she hides, essentially works on behalf of the library, hiding books that have just been turned in so that they become late and that the person has to pay a late fee, and then the library gets more funding to buy more books that she can get a handle on, presumably. As she's, we get some motivations. We find that, really quirky. I thought it was a really endearing story. But we finish off with them basically accepting her as a new goalkeeper, and that they're going to go do a job right now. The old man turns around, a shadow door opens up, and, she's surprised. She's like, okay, well, I guess so. And then they go and they go do stuff. The two, Heath and the old man, are going to go steal stuff while Mary has to guard for the things from the other side passing through as the goalkeeper.
It's such a cool story. I love the mystery that is set up with this alley and how it is described is very excellent. It's quite tangible how it's being described, and then the old man in the shadow has this great mystery to it, and I think this is just a really great scene that is written here, and the dialogue back and forth is giving so much characterization to this main character along with the others. So I think the only thing that I'm really looking forward to is kind of seeing what sort of otherworldly creatures are going to try to get through this gate, and exactly what the other side of this, I guess, portal really looks like. And I'm eager to see how they describe that. So yeah, really great scene, really great story.
Yeah, my favorite part is just Mary's characterization and her actions. I thought it was very, very endearing.
Oh, very, yeah. All right, so the next story is by Wildbow with Sign.
Yeah, interesting username.
Very interesting.
That one.
In fact, I think I've heard that before somewhere.
I think somewhere.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
I don't know where.
Yeah, the writing style feels somewhat familiar.
Yeah, very.
And so, of course, Wildbow, author Worm, wrote an entry. He's written a couple of entries for Do the Right Thing before. They've all been absolutely brilliant, and I recommend that people go and read all the others. Wildbow mentioned on the Discord that he started writing a story based on the words, and then started sort of thinking that he could do a short serial about it, and reframed it in his head to make it a sort of teaser or concept snip for the idea. So I mean I'm very happy for our podcast to have inspired an idea, especially so interesting as this one. So to get into it. So it's a little bit long, so I'm not going to go as beat by beat as we usually do. But so we start off with kind of a lot of world building and through setting description. It's really quite fascinating as we figure out what this world is and how it works. To sum up, actually, again, everyone, please go read it beforehand, because I think reading this is kind of the discovery as you're reading it is part of the enjoyment. So yeah, go do that rather than listening to me summarizing. Pause now and then go. So this is sort of like a post-apocalyptic prison planet is what we're getting hints of. Mm-hmm. We have this small cast of characters. This our first one. Our main character, I think her name is Shield. Shield, yeah. She's the last one of her entire group. Everyone on this planet, all the humans on this planet are covered in these intricate cybernetic glyph markings is how I'm imagining them. And everyone's minds has sort of been scooped out of all their memories and only leaving their skills and such. So we have this small group all named with like descriptive names, right? Box and Shield and what's the third one?
Shield, Box, there's Vault.
Vault, yeah. So they all have the different skill sets, and they're working together to survive, basically. They also have like cybernetic enhancement and stuff. But we are concerned as they've been followed by something called the Moth, which that they are not supposed to look at or hear or see or anything or really perceive it at all, because that harms them, which is a fascinating idea, and I'll connect to some other things in a second. So Valve is keeping on watch for the Moth, he's kind of useless. We get a complicated some feelings about them. The Moth shows up, and its sounds basically start causing brain damage to Valve. Or to Vault, sorry. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of just terrifying, and the very idea that these sort of like overlapping whispers, worm into their mind, and they kind of start reverting to like a childlike state, and they're twitching, and it's really horrible. But they escape, and then they get to basically this small garden that they've been trying to reach. The three of them. Yeah, but there's another thing there, the glyph, which is an image-based thing rather than sound-based. Through some Herculean tasks, Shield is able to kill it, but not before having to witness it a little bit and causing more brain damage. Her eyes like permanently twitching closed. She's having trouble thinking of some things. It's really quite horrifying. Mm-hmm. But she's able to kill it. The Moth is still somewhere out there, but the thing is over. Vault is basically brain dead, but they also encounter some pods of other humans, and we see out in the sky this gigantic mechanical things covering multiple planets, and we're super concerned about what exactly is going on over there. These humans being reprogrammed into machines or something of the sort anyway. Terrifying ideas of greater world building. But anyway, we finish off with opening up these pods of other humans. They're kind of being inducted into the group, which really only has like one functioning member left. Vault is dead. Box is mostly okay. But Shield, can't go on, and it's just going to sit down and try to give advice to the next person that passes by. And the new pod people are going to try to survive just like she did and how she failed. Really dark, really fascinating. I really, really enjoyed it, and I think everyone should go read it.
Yeah, I mean, this story is such a ride. And the world building is on point. I love how we are just automatically dropped into this fantastical world. And yeah, I just really love all of these characters. Like they all have their own thing going for them, and I can see how each one could be rooted for. And I love the mystery of this moth that's just in the background constantly. And yeah, there are just so many different elements of this story that are working so well in tandem with one another that I think the only thing I can really say is that please go and read this. It's definitely really great, well thought out story that I'm surprised Wildbow was able to write so much in only 30 minutes.
Okay, well, it probably went a little bit over like we do,
Yeah,
so probably not exactly 30
but
minutes.
still,
But
being able to drop this on us while just writing off of the cuff, it's fantastic.
yeah, it was not something with additional planning and I mean, I'm sure that he's had some thoughts related to this. It didn't come completely out of the void, but I got the understanding that this wasn't like an idea that Wildbow already had sitting around. So yeah, just really fascinating. What I find so interesting about it is that we get answers to a lot of questions, and yet having those answers does not give us enough to understand everything that's going on. It just makes us more curious, right? We know some other planet. We know that people are dropping from the sky. We know that there's some mechanical threat happening, but we have no idea what it is. I mean, our character doesn't know what these things are either, and yeah, that's what makes it so interesting. Oh, the last thing I wanted to connect it to is it reminds me of other info hazards, and I think this is a really good introduction to the concept of info hazards. There's a short story, I forget the author, but it's a sci-fi short story called I think it's called The Basilisk.
Oh,
which
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, you know the internet thing that was named after the short story, but the short story,
Mm-hmm.
which I'd prefer to talk about, it has these basically like internet trolls, but real life. They just want to hurt people. They spray paint, this image, this basilisk, that if you look at it, you go brain dead, basically, right? But the way that they're able to do it themselves is that they have these goggles that basically make everything into like a bunch of shards. Like you can't actually see what's going on. You wear these goggles, and your entire vision is just like a bug's vision, right? Like a fly, right? Broken up into these images, so you can almost barely can tell where you're going, but that's it. And so this person's putting down, this troll's putting down the basilisk before they're caught by the police. Then they are brought to their to the cell, and they have to sit in there for a very long time. And while they're in there, they're thinking about what they saw, right? They looked at the basilisk, but they had the goggles. But then as they're thinking about it, they realize that they've worn the goggles long enough to be able to decipher what is actually the image, right? And so then they start putting it together in their heads, and they're not able to stop themselves. And then in their heads, they reconstruct the image of the basilisk, and then it hurts them, and they go brain dead, and that's the end of the story. So, anyway, that reminded me. This reminded me of that, which I think is a fascinating story too. So.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so next up is Starless Night with Do the Bat Thing.
So I read the title, and immediately the Arctic Monkeys song came into my head, and I was listening to it the whole time. So this is a really interesting story as well. So we kind of get the premise for this entire story immediately with Marcus says, "So what do you think?" And then the response flashed into Sam's mind like lightning. "I want to see what the inside of your eye looks like." And then goes, "He caught the thought seconds after its birth and drowned it in the depths of his mind. Rather than letting that thought loose, he smiled and put the paper down." So basically the story talks a lot about intrusive thoughts, and it's a really interesting and very distressing exploration of it. They feel even stronger than normal intrusive thoughts, and it almost feels like the more that Sam, the main character, is struggling with them, the more attention is paid to them, the stronger they are. That's kind of the feeling I got. So repeatedly we go through this conversation. Marcus is asking about homework sort of stuff, and it just seems like a friendly bantering conversation. It's actually very pleasant. But every single exchange, Sam is actually really, really, really struggling with not thinking about stabbing Marcus with a pen, or looking at his brain. And we really explore this internal turmoil that Sam has. They kind of hate themselves. He kind of hates himself for having it, especially because he's also thinking about even worse thoughts that are not even physical, right? We only get the illusion, but of just how horrible of a person you have to be to think those thoughts, or at least how horrible you must think of yourself if you think those thoughts. We finally finish off with they're going to be walking home, and they stop by the street, and immediately, as soon as we hear about a street and see the cars whizzing by, we're like, oh no. Well, at very best, we're gonna have a series of intrusive thoughts about pushing someone into traffic. But then comes the final thought here. Sam was ready to push the idea away without a second thought, but then something hit him. The only way to satisfy his curiosity is to fulfill it. Children learn not to touch things when it burned them. They were never curious about them again. So, if we were to touch something, to do something bad, just once, then maybe this would stop. Maybe he could be free of this maddening curiosity. And then, hey, Marcus. Sam put his hand on his shoulder. Could you help me with something? Yeah, sure, man. What do you need? And get the implication there that
puts him in the street.
Things don't end well for Marcus.
Yeah. Honestly, this is such a great exploration of those intrusive thoughts. And I think they are captured very well. How they can come out of the blue, and it seems that the more you suppress them, the more prevalent they really are. And I think that's a really great thing that's going for this story. And I love how these very morbid thoughts are the backdrop to a very mundane conversation about this other person's paper. And yeah, overall, I think it's a really well crafted scene. Yeah, I just really love reading it, and I just had this kind of skin crawly feeling throughout because I just knew that it would end with something happening. And I love how the writer didn't really give us that. They gave us the implication of something happening that just keeps us thinking about it. So yeah, really well done. Really well crafted story.
Yeah, definitely echoed with my own struggles with intrusive thoughts. I had them more like in high school and stuff, I think. Mm-hmm. But yeah, remember really struggled with that. Tangent. I don't know if you had the same thing, Jarvis, but as a kid, I definitely worried a lot about accidentally making myself develop obsessive compulsive disorder.
Okay.
Of just I thought about not stepping on cracks in the sidewalk really, really hard. Yes. Sometimes. It started off as a game, but then it became something that I was actually concerned about, and I was concerned that I was concerned about it. And there was other times, stuff where I cared too much about numbers or other curiosities, and I feel I don't know how organically it can happen, but there's definitely been times, especially as a kid, where I was really worried about not being in control of my own thoughts, right? When you can't, like an earworm where you can't stop thinking of a song, right? And it just does the same thing over and over again. I would have that, but just random thoughts or images, like having a GIF in your head that doesn't go away. And it was really, really distressing, and I was worried that it would happen forever. So
yeah, no,
and it didn't, but I wonder if I'm alone in that.
No, I mean, I've had a very similar experience. As a child also, I would not want to step on cracks or any sort of boundaries, to where for many years within my life. Okay, so in your high school or middle school, did you have floor tiles that kind of alternated colors?
Yeah.
So for a very long time, up until I think sophomore year of high school, I would actively make sure that I only stepped on black tile. And it was this weird thing in my head to where if I stepped on a white tile, I wouldn't have a good day. And I think it was kind of, what's the word? It was reinforced because the times I did step on white tiles, the day wouldn't be that good. But it could have just been me thinking that the day would be bad, that the day basically turned out bad. And then even now in my later life, I have a lot of those intrusive thoughts. Every single last day, I will just be doing something, and then I will hear or feel the idea of something saying, "Don't forget." I don't know what I'm supposed to not forget. Apparently, I've already forgotten it, but just those, and that just happens, and it'll just echo constantly throughout the day. And that, coupled with every other intrusive thought I have of just hey, what if I step in the road, or hey, what if I just slept in the park, and just certain things like that, things that of course you don't act upon, but no, those intrusive thoughts are very real and very relevant. Yeah,
very concerning. The human brain is terrible.
It's it's absolutely terrifying. And the worst part is that a lot of times it doesn't make sense as to why we are thinking these things. But I think the beauty of it is that it is very natural across the board. So, you know, there's no reason to really feel kind of like the black sheep in a sense when you do have these thoughts.
I wonder if animals can develop obsessive compulsive disorder. I'm sure some do, but I wonder how many.
No, yeah, that's a really good question.
Or maybe that's just a consequence of like having a society with like language and stuff and like categorizing things.
Yeah, it could just be like a big brain thing.
Yeah, galaxy brain problems.
But thank you very much, Starless Night, for your great story.
Yeah, thank you for helping me think about this stuff. So,
and next up is Ghost Pac-Man 4 with which direction?
So we start off with this pretty unpleasant scene with a wave of fire flowing over our main character, scorching them down to the bone and then down through their soul. And they burned and burned, reducing them to nothing but the fire that used to be their body. But then the ash gives way to life and plants, and then animals, and eventually sentience, and then this new version of them. And so once they are alive, they think about that the wave of fire is going to pass around once more. So they go east, right, trying to outrun it. But then that's where the goalkeeper is. That's not going to let them pass. So the goalkeeper basically beats them down and says that you cannot pass. And then the main character just waits until the fire comes and burns them just as bad as before. Then they go north and they go to this wall of ice and they try to climb it. And while the fire does pass below, eventually all the ice melts and they fall into the fire anyway. Then they go south and they come to a great void and they fling themselves off, but that's not even enough to escape the flames. And then finally, this last time, they just sit down and look at the sky, and the lines are, "There was nothing I could do, so I would just enjoy the time until it came. And then I couldn't suppress the fear of the coming wave to truly enjoy myself, and then it came and dashed away even that meager happiness." So pretty depressing ending here, pretty depressing train of thought. But I mean, that's the point of this, right? This sort of inevitability of pain and death, perhaps. Ghost Pac-Man asks what we think that the theme is, and I think there's multiple answers here. It depends on what you're analogizing the flame to. If it's death or pain or I don't know, something else. But there's a couple of things that it could be, and the thing that would make our main character happiest is if they actually could suppress the worry enough for them to actually enjoy themselves, but they worry too much so they can't.
But this is a really great story, and as you said, it is very depressing, but purposefully so. It's and I think the great thing is that there are so many possible meanings that you can really derive from this, whatever this flame really is. I think that's just a testament to how great this story really is. I mean, there are multiple facets that you can really latch onto. And then the main character at the end, it is sad that this wave is gonna hit, but throughout the entire piece, there's this sense of inevitability that's very strong throughout, and it definitely drives it home. So really great story.
And also to be fair to the main character, Mr. Main Character, you're also immortal, so like a little bit of flame every lifetime isn't that bad in comparison.
It's not that.
I'm just saying. I mean, I would prefer to be swallowed by a flame for a very long time if it meant that I could, keep on doing stuff in the meantime for a very long time. Just saying. Just saying. Maybe appreciate it. Maybe appreciate the fact that you come back after being burned by the fire. Just saying.
We don't all come back after that.
Exactly. All the grasses and the birds didn't.
Exactly.
So.
Well, all right. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted a story this week. Without what you do, there would be no Do the Right Thing. Just two people talking about their own stories. Very, very narcissistic-like. But we want to take a quick moment to thank everyone who did submit a story this week. So, thank you very much to Sarah Penguin.
Thank you to Paradox.
Thank you, Ace of Sword.
Thank you, Kamikaze Tomato.
Thank you, Wildbow.
Thank you, Starless Knight, a new submitter. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jarby Jazz.
Thank you, Ghost Pac-Man 4.
And also, we want to say thank you to Paradox for leaving comments under other people's stories. Not only is leaving comments beneficial for yourself so you can have a better keen eye when it comes to analyzing texts, but also it's great to give someone else that feedback because that's the whole point. That's the whole point of us posting our stories in the subreddit is to get that feedback. So thank you very much, Paradox, this week for leaving comments under other people's stories.
That's right, and do keep in mind that every time that you leave a comment on someone else's story, that certainly incentivizes them to go and leave a comment on yours or someone else's. So by helping someone else out, by reading their story, by having their voice be heard and telling them how you feel about it, you're not only helping them, you're also helping yourself. They both in the roundabout way of getting them perhaps to also leave a comment, but additionally that you're sharpening your own analysis skills. So absolutely consider doing that yourself. And of course, you get an increased chance of getting selected every single week that you do that. So do keep that in mind.
Yes, exactly. If you want to be like all of these wonderful writers and write a story within 30 minutes, you can do that by going to our subreddit, which is /r/do the right thing. All you have to do is pick whatever week's words you want to write about, set a timer for 30 minutes, and get to writing.
That's right. And if you don't have a Reddit account and you want to send in your story or just want to tell us what's up, you can send us an email at rightthingcast@gmail.com.
And if you want to see next week's words and have as much time as possible to write your story for that week, well, you should just wait till the end of this podcast. But if you want to do that and have a secondary reference or something, you can go to our Twitter, which is @RightThingCast.
Well, you'll have access to the words. You'll be notified about the new words before the next episode comes out. Essentially, that's the benefit. And of course, you also get other announcements, like our announcements that we're actually going to be on hiatus for 1 week, starting next week. So I'm going out of town on a trip that I did not consent to beforehand, but I have to go anyway. So there's going to be one missing episode from this podcast and Decomposing Worm the next week. So that is unfortunate, but that's how it's going. When we get back, one thing that we want to point out is that when we get back, we will be talking about 5 stories from each week. We'll be talking about 5 stories of this week coming up. So don't worry. If you leave your stories, you have the exact same amount of being talked about, exact amount of chance of being talked about as any other time. And then, of course, if you leave a story the week after, you get another chance. So, there's even a chance that you might have 2 of your stories talked about. So, absolutely consider doing that. In fact, I think that probably most people that write for each of those weeks will be selected. So definitely consider doing that. So there won't be an episode, but there will be words, and we do encourage you to do the right thing.
Exactly. And if you want to throw us a little bit of support and just help us create the content that we hope you enjoy watching and listening to, you can support us by going to the Doof Media Patreon. Basically, by spending $1 or more per month, you'll get access to the Doof Media Discord, which is filled with wonderful people looking to have great conversations. And on top of that, you are supporting us in making the content that we love to make and the content that we hope you enjoy.
That's right. One additional benefit is that the $5 level, the Doof Dancer level, you get access to our Doof and Chill sessions, which are our monthly variety show kind of things where we all do a different thing. This month, actually last week, me and Clarence, we did basically an interview with Matt and Scott. They asked a bunch of questions. We ended up talking about Worm a lot because, of course, that's what we all enjoy. We're all doing podcasts about Worm. So yeah, but it was a really, really enjoyable conversation. Clarence had a good time. I had a good time. And we hope that you guys learned a little bit more about us during it. So if you're a $5 patron, you can find that on patreon.com. I think next month we are playing Fiasco. I think Scott,
Ooh.
Matt, and I forget exactly who else is involved, but they're playing the I don't saying RPG implies too much Dungeons and Dragons to it, but it is a role playing game with lots of drama. I've seen it played before, and it seems like a lot of fun to watch and play. So, yeah, absolutely consider donating at that level.
Definitely. And Matias, what is going on in Doof?
So as I mentioned, right, there's that Doof and Chill, and for just to mention some other things, the Doofcast next week is on Psycho-Pass, the first season of that anime. So consider tuning into that. And of course, even though I've been plugging it almost every single week on both of my podcasts, I want to again call out the game club that is happening next Friday night, 9:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. The Doof Game Club is happening, and they're covering the video game FTL. So again, if you haven't played it before, you can go ahead and download it right now on the day that it comes out. You should have enough time to play it to really get and understand what's going on. It's an incredible game. It's probably only maximum like $15. It's brilliant. It's going to be my top 10 games of all time for a very long time. I'm pretty sure. And it's a cute game where you do you're the captain of a spaceship fighting against others, very Star Trek style. So you manage your crew and whatnot. And I really can't wait to hear Elliot and Ruben talk about it. So it's it's going to be a good time.
Nice. All right, so let's talk about next week's words. So next week's words are going to be arch, monkey, opposed, and up. And the theme for next week is going to be illusion.
So the words were arch, as in like the architectural part, and although in fact I think you could use architecture as a word. It's ARCH, or you could use archduke, right? Archduke. I can never figure if you're supposed to pronounce the K sound. Or you could use archaeology. You got plenty of options here. And then additionally, you have a monkey, which is a kind of animal that is related to humans, somewhat. You could or do a monkey wrench, which is a kind of wrench. I don't know what kind of wrench it is, but it is.
It's a big one.
There's also monkeying around, which is acting like a monkey. The next word is opposed, which is when something is against something else or something on the opposing side, the opposite side. And then up, which is the opposite of down. It's opposed to down, in fact.
Oh, okay.
So, Jarvis.
Yes.
You're the one writing next week.
I am.
What story are you going to write?
My story is going to be a little bit down to earth, right? I've been watching a lot of Air Bud recently. And also learning a lot more about Michael Jackson, which has brought me to want to write a story about a monkey named Bubbles. And this monkey specifically has been trained to the point of being able to work at McDonald's, also known as the Golden Arches, right? And a lot of people are opposed to this monkey handling their food, getting their cash, and overall providing them with good customer service. Because sadly, the barrier is that the monkey can't speak in anything beyond sign language, and our school system has failed us in trying to teach us that for the right portion of our schooling. So this mute monkey is trying his best to really serve these orders. And he's doing it all for food. This monkey doesn't really know about money, nor does he care. And honestly, he puts his best foot forward and does the best job that he possibly can. But people just aren't as accepting as they used to be. So, on a very sad and very fateful night, when this monkey was locking up the store, turning off the lights, cleaning the ice cream machine, four goons with fire and pitchforks come busting in, trying to get this monkey. And thankfully, the monkey runs out. But those four goons, those horrible four people, set that McDonald's ablaze, light it up. Now the monkey is without a job, not able to really make ends meet. So eventually, he just has to go back to selling bananas.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a really tragic story. That's a tragic story. That's a rags to slightly better rags to rags.
Yeah.
Story.
Sadly, there are no riches for monkeys.
That's right. That's how the saying goes. That there's no riches for monkeys. There's no riches for monkeys.
And speaking about riches, what story are you going to write next week? Even though you aren't writing.
I'm not writing next week, but if I did, I would write this story, where we're following the story of the Archmage of a kingdom that spans the entire universe.
Oh.
So the entire universe is one kingdom, and this is the Archmage of that kingdom, who it so happens to be is actually a octopus.
Oh, wow.
So this octopus Archmage, right? He's got 8 arms, which actually he made an extra arm, so he actually has 9 arms. He's got 9 arms as the Archmage, and he's doing lots of magic, right? He's flinging his arms around. He's got 9 wands in his hands, but he accidentally flicks his one of his tentacles the wrong way and casts a spell that turns everyone in the universe into monkeys, which is not great. In fact, it's actually so pervasive that every single organism turns into a monkey of the appropriate size, right? So you have elephant-sized monkeys, you have people-sized monkeys, you actually have bacteria-sized monkeys running around on the microscopic level, which is really quite distressing and disturbing. The only other difference is where plants they keep their green coloration, but they are still monkey shaped. They just don't move. So everything's been turned into monkeys. It's really quite concerning. So but the only thing that hasn't been turned into monkey is of course the octopus. So the other the arch wizard, who's actually always been opposed to the octopus, to giving the octopus Archmage so much power. The Archwizard starts a campaign to bring the octopus down for crimes against I want to say humanity, but it's more like monkey manity to the universe, the crimes against the universe, and leads an uprising. But actually, it was the Archwizard that sabotaged the octopus's Archmage's wand, switching. Well, actually, just when the Archwizard handed the wand to the octopus, he flipped it up and around so that the end that was supposed to be pointing at himself was pointing at everything else. So the octopus was actually just trying to turn himself into a monkey, and instead turned everything else in the universe into a monkey. And it's this really, really just an unfortunate story. And I already used the word, so that's just the end of it right there. And then a lot of people died because there's not meant to be cellular sized monkeys, and it just didn't work out. So
wow, that's a very tragic story. Honestly,
it is. Yeah,
and I think the only thing that I'm really thinking about is what was the right choice there?
Yeah, that's always a question. It's in a world gone mad, this world is crazy, it's like if you get a million, monkeys typing on typewriters, right?
Yeah.
You eventually come out with every single, outcome, and it's like in which of those outcomes, in which outcome is do you do the right thing,
Yeah, what is the do the right thing?
Yeah.